You're absolutely correct. The only observation I will have is that, fortunately, precisely because of the new media, we are no longer at the mercy of the state construction of the appearance of reality. Your diagnosis is absolutely correct. But my prognosis is that we are not at the mercy of the state construction of reality. No longer. We used to. In the course of my own lifetime, what passes for news for New York Times, used to pass for news in New York Times, was the position of the White House, or the position of the Pentagon, or the position of the State Department. They will posit the normative discourse, and then they will regurgitate it. And there will be slight variations among New York Times, Washington Post, Christian Science Monitor, etc. And there was nothing you could do. You were at the mercy of this, and then they manufactured consent. As recently as the U.S. invasion of Iraq. Judith Miller, Ahmad Chalabi sort of played Judith Miller like a broken violin. They manufactured weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, and they went to war, manufacturing consent, as Chomsky calls it, and there was nothing that anybody can do. But now compare it with the equal attempts to demonize Iran for yet another military strike. The modes of resistance to it is far greater. Beginning with the US-led invasion of Afghanistan, they reduced the entirety of Afghanistan into the face of Osama bin Laden. If you were to pass through a Penn Station in New York, there were these darts with the face of Osama bin Laden on it, so you could. So the entirety of a nation-state, history, culture, civilization, all became the face of Osama bin Laden. So when bombers start bombing, you don't see human beings. You just see the face of Osama bin Laden. A few years later, the same darts became the face of Saddam Hussein. The entirety of Iraq, the cradle of civilization, okay, where our alphabet comes from, Mesopotamia, became the face of Saddam Hussein. And soon after that, they started changing it to the face of Ahmadinejad. Now Ahmadinejad, so you go through the mutations. Osama bin Laden, Saddam Hussein, and now Ahmadinejad. But I always said that the reason Iran has not been invaded is Iranian cinema. Complicates the face of Iran. You see, right now in your own city, you have had a magnificent number of Iranian films. So it complicates the face and doesn't allow the reduction of the face of a 75 million human beings to the face of Ahmadinejad. So when you hit, you don't see humans. So I agree with your diagnosis, absolutely, as recently as our contemporary politics. But fortunately, we are no longer at its mercy.
I enjoyed your glancing references to secularism, and I was a little curious because we're both fairly dismissive. I myself don't find it a particularly useful term, because the godlessness implicit in secularism, that is the separation of man from state or state from religion, flies in the face of the lived experience, certainly in this country, of people of all communities. But I do prefer the use of the word pluralism, because we are talking about embracing the diversities of our society. And when Ashish, you spoke about the embracing the otherness of others, I've often felt that in our country, whereas in Europe, for example, the Yugoslav Civil War, we had Freudians talking about the narcissism of minor differences. Here in India, we're constantly celebrating the commonality of major differences, of actually trying to integrate within a vision of the state a notion of multiple identities, where pluralism is part of the fundamental ethos of the state. It's just a thought rather than a well-crafted question, but I would very much enjoy both of you reacting to that. Since you began on secularism with a glancing reference and moved away very quickly, I'd love to have you come back on pluralism, and Ashish, particularly in the Indian context, but Professor Dabashi.
I will very quickly give this response, because this is the important thing. I think people in these countries know how to live with each other, and they have done so for centuries. Conflictual often, but also no serious violence of the kind we have seen in more recent times. This we recognize, we know this. all our heroes except Jawaharlal Nehru come from the past of India. From people who never knew most of, except one, Gandhi knew what secularism was and did not. For example, he did say that those who think you should keep politics and religion separate understand neither politics nor religion. But apart from that, all the others we named had never heard of secularism. Ashoka, Buddha, Akbar, they could not be that. I would but thought that in a society like ours, we would have rediscovered and explored, at least the scholars would try to explore what are the categories by which these people operate. That we do not do. Instead of that, we have this concept of secularism, which most of Indians, only 2.5% Indians speak English, and of that 2.5%, I think not more than 10% know what is secularism, and probably less than 1% can spell it correctly or give its history. But secularism has become a slogan. It is a slogan. I do believe that every religion in India has its own principles of tolerance. And actually, I am a student of ethnic and religious violence. I have been studying that for 45 years. I find in riot after riot, ordinary people who try to save the neighbors always invoke the principles of their religion. Always invoke the principles of their religion. Never this kind of hollow, pompous expressions. And it's a fantastic record. Now we are just trying to complete this study of partition violence, only study of partition violence. We have interviewed some 1,500 people. 40% of them say they have either been directly helped by somebody or they have heard of somebody being helped by the opposition, somewhere. Now this is something, this figure is something I challenge you to match from any data from anywhere else in the world. Anywhere else in the world. This is a unique situation. And I think even in our riots now, if you study this data, it will not be that positive. In 47 we were not modern enough and we were not progressive enough. 47 was India was still a primitive country waiting to be engineered. So they had the humanity. They had the humanity to try to save. And there are so many instances of people laying down their lives, trying to save their neighbors. This we have never explored. I've seen these things even in places like, in the case of the Ram Janambhoomi movement. It was not dead. And it is probably still not dead. In Delhi, during the anti-Sikh riots, 22 communities were affected. In 20 of the 22, the Hindus tried to save the Sikhs, protected the Sikhs. Only in 2, they collaborated with the mob. And these 2 were new colonies. But this is India. In the partition case, most of the persons we are talking about Hindus, so they are the Muslims who helped run away from Pakistan. And I can give you, I have a Pakistani friend who has been collecting data on this subject for years, and he has got hundreds of cases of this kind. It's a fantastic record. And this record is not captured in our theories of secularism. It's a desiccated theoretical posturing which may have